Welcome to the New England Football Show. I'm John Serenitas, and as always, I'm joined by Kevin Stone. And this week, we have a special guest, Rene Ingoglia from ESPN. He is an ESPN college football analyst and a UMass Hall of Famer. Rene went into the Hall of Fame in 2007 for his playing career at UMass in the early to mid-'90s. Rene, thank you for taking some time to join us tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
And, me and Kevin were talking before we went live, and we said, boy, the timing couldn't be better to have you on, to have a UMass guy on. Obviously, big weekend for UMass, big weekend for the Minutemen hockey program, student body, alumni. Just real quick, give me your thoughts. What does it mean to you as a UMass alumnus to watch the Minutemen win a national championship in hockey?
Yes, I was actually sitting there watching it, and the moment the clock ticked down to 0 and they rushed the ice and the horn blew, tears ran down my eyes, because I know how hard athletes, regardless of the sport, I know how hard the athletes work, the coaches work, the administration, the time they put into it, the fan base, the parents, and especially, guys, in a year like this, right, a pandemic year, everything all these programs have been through, especially that hockey program. Coach Carvel's done an unbelievable job. The culture, you hear him talk about the culture, kind of starting it from the ground floor. And I'm just so proud to be an alum of UMass, to see one of their programs win a national championship. I just couldn't be happier for them.
Yeah, and, I think for people around here, at least for me, and I remember 98 when they won it in football with Mark Whipple and that group. And obviously you guys, your classes, the years you were there, you guys laid the foundation for that eventual success. But it's really nice to see, we've seen it with Boston College. They've won hockey championships. We've seen it with some of the other programs around here win national titles. But it's an impressive feat for your athletic department, for the specific program that wins a title. It really means a lot, doesn't it? Especially to the alumni. It's a source of pride.
Oh, no doubt about it. And let's put it in the hockey world, right? Listen, we're in Western Mass. We're not in Boston, right? We're not in the Beanpot. We're not talking about Boston College, Harvard, BU. We're talking about UMass, UMass Amherst. So that's a huge deal, especially in the hockey world. But yeah, for any program to win a national championship, especially at the Division I level, a huge accomplishment for the university, for the athletic department in whole. Ryan Bamford, the athletic director, has done a really nice job so far. And again, a lot of obstacles, but it's so nice to see one of the teams break through and win a national championship. So congrats to the hockey team. Well-deserved championship.
Now, Rene, first, you just crushed my soul not mentioning Northeastern at all.
Oh, well, sorry.
I'm a Northeastern fan, but just speaking towards your time at UMass, obviously, again, the football program is, they've had some downtimes now, but just reflecting on your time, how fondly do you look back on that? And just kind of talk about that time and what it means to you.
Well, and so I'll start with Northeastern. I think I rushed for about 800 yards and 10 touchdowns against them in my career, if that makes you feel any better. So there you go.
That's funny.
Listen, I love UMass. It's the one school. So, my situation, guys, it was kind of weird coming out of high school. I blew my knee out my senior year. So I had a total ACL reconstruction. I had what's called an unhappy triad. So I was recruited pretty heavily in high school. I lost all my scholarship offers. So, late 80s, early 90s, you blow a knee out, you're done. So UMass was the only school to offer me a full scholarship, and kind of goes full circle. Syracuse recruited me really heavily out of high school. Head coach at the time, Hall of Fame, great, God rest his soul, Dick McPherson, who, of course, used to coach at UMass. Jim Reed was an assistant under Dick McPherson back in the day and was the head coach at UMass. So basically, Dick McPherson called Jim Reed and said, you need to give this guy a scholarship. So it was the only scholarship I got. Went there, worked my tail off, and just, couldn't. They always say things happen for a reason, and I truly believe that. I ended up in the right school, the right place. The memories you really have, it's about your teammates, and kind of the stuff I talked about, how hard the hockey team worked to get to where they are. It's 100 guys, and of course I'm just rounding up or down. It's 100 guys just putting effort in and day out for a common goal to be as good as you can, and that camaraderie. I mean, that's what you really miss. And it's crazy to think that I played, kind of in the early 90s to the mid 90s, being that it's 2021 now. I mean, my body still think, I don't know. If it was 3rd and 2, guys, I think I could still pick up a first down. I'm just saying.
You think you'd get behind that fullback on a lead play?
Yeah, I think I could pick up 3 and get the chains moving. Now, if you need 5 yards, you got to probably take me out, but I could get 2 or 3.
Short yardage specialist. Rene, talk a little bit about the state of the UMass football program right now. Obviously, as Kevin mentioned, that they've gone through some hard times in recent years. Walt Bell was hired a couple of years ago. He's come in, strong recruiter, strong resume, coached at the FBS level. He's got strong recruiting ties to the Mid-Atlantic as well as the Southeast. But talk about the current state of the UMass football program and the direction you think they're heading in.
Well, I think they're definitely headed in the right direction. And we'll start here. The University of Massachusetts made the right decision to go from FCS to FBS. I know there's a lot of doubters out there.
I agree with you more.
They should go back down. Listen, you don't go back down. FCS football is very expensive. At least FBS football, there's a little bit of a prize at the end of the rainbow if you can get there with your program. And they're working in the right direction. I hate to be Captain Obvious. Got to try to get into a conference. Ryan Bamford knows that. We all know that. Working for it. Everyone says, well, they should have played in the MAC. A lot of people don't remember the time UMass was tied with the MAC. They were tied with Temple, and they kind of went together. Temple ended up leaving, right, because the Big East kind of dissolved. The American came into play. So, and then the MAC was kind of like, well, you bring all your sports or none. Well, you're not going to take all your other sports out of the Atlantic 10 and go to the MAC. No disrespect to the MAC. You're just not going to do that. So football has become independent. The thing with the program is right off the bat, I think they kind of got behind the 8 ball, and it is what it is. Sometimes you don't make the right hires to start out. It's very expensive. Things don't fall into place, and then you're just kind of grinding in motion. And I think that's kind of what happened with the program. I think Walt Bell, a young coach, a go-getter. I've had many conversations with him, and you talked about it, John, a good recruiter. Listen, I call college football for a living for ESPN. I see tons of programs day in and day out during football season. It's not rocket science, guys. You have to recruit. You need players. Once you get players, you're going to coach them up, but you can't win without the players. And I think they're finally doing a good job getting some players in, coming down south a little bit, grabbing some of that speed. So it's definitely headed in the right direction. They put the money in. Their performance center, their weight room, their locker room, really, really nice. So they're going in the right direction. Now the next step is you just got to win some of those games, right? Some of those tweener games where it could go either way. You got to win those. And then you got to knock off a team where it's not expected, right? So I just looked it up, and I knew it had been a while. The last time Boston College came to Amherst, Doug Flutie was a sophomore quarterback. It was 1982. Wow. Well, they're coming back this season, 2021. They're playing in Amherst. So that's a big deal for UMass football. So if you can knock a team off like that, or you play Pitt on the road, they go to Coastal Carolina on the road. Who would have thought that'd be a huge game, right? Coastal's probably going to be a top 25 team. I did them 3 times last year. Very good program. So they have, and Ryan's done a great job of this, and it's really hard to do as an independent. He has put together some nice scheduling. And so they got an opportunity to play some teams to knock off some programs to kind of get on the radar. And then they got a good mixture of teams where they can win enough games where they can get to a bowl game. So I'm looking forward to the 2021 season.
And I think you made a couple of really good points there, Rene. First of all, going back to the FCS level, I couldn't agree with you more. It makes 0 sense. Because there is no carrot at the end of that stick if you go back down there. Yeah, you can make the playoffs. Yeah, you can make a playoff run per se, but the money's not there. If you want to get that money to play up, you got to be an FBS program today. The Power 5 programs aren't going to be paying the FCS schools what they will pay an FBS school to come to their place and play. But then the other part of it that I think is interesting is they do need to get into a conference. And I think that's a whole nother conversation, and I think it's a hard deal, right? Yeah. It's easier said than done. But I do think they are headed in the right direction. I think one thing that people need to realize is it's hard today in the college football world to be a competitive mid-major because you're at a facilities disadvantage. In some instances, you're in a location or talent disadvantage. There's different factors, but you mentioned Ryan Bamford and the job he's done. He definitely has the program as the athletic director trending in the right direction. I think Walt Bell's assembled a pretty good staff here. Brings back Alex Miller this offseason to be offensive line coach, run game coordinator. If they could figure it out and get it going and start winning some games and being more competitive, you can definitely position yourself to eventually get into a league and eventually get to a point where you're playing in bowl games, which is what needs to happen, that the program needs a higher profile. But again, it's easier said than done. I think getting BC to come to McGuirk, I think that's huge. I think going down to Coastal Carolina, you play them tough. Jamie Chadwell's done a great job there. Yeah. Those are all steps towards building a good competitive program. But, and I've said this on our blog, and people think I'm being a honk about it, but you have to be patient. I know the UMass faithful have been patient with this program, but hang in there. I think a little bit more patience would be good.
Well, I agree with you. Listen, I live in the South. I live in Orlando, Florida, where if your team is an SEC team,
by the way,
well, it's beautiful. I golf every day, but that's another story. If you're a fan of an SEC team and they go 10-2, you want the coach fired. So I mean, no fan base has patience. I get it. And another thing about the profile of the university, and you touched on it, is just playing bigger schools and getting on national TV every day. That it makes so much impact for the university. I mean, that's income in and of itself. Advertising for the school. And we talked about Coastal Carolina. I mean, what Coastal Carolina did for their university, what their football program did for their university this year, I mean, it was worth millions upon millions of dollars just being on national TV. They end up having game day there. So there's a huge carrot at the end of the rainbow if UMass just stays the course and things can, I've always said Amherst, Massachusetts, it's kind of like that hidden gem in the college football world. It's kind of like a state college in Penn State. It kind of has that vibe. And I think, you could have a huge stadium. The crowds would come. You just got to win at the end of the day. And they are headed in the right direction. I think 2021, though, is a huge season for them to make that next step.
Yeah, and just to add on to that as well, the local recruiting here, they're getting a lot of guys to go look at UMass now. And I think that's huge because you still have Boston College that's now, an entirely new system and all that. So I couldn't agree more. But getting away from football real quick, you became a police officer down in Orlando after your playing career. What went into that decision and how did football kind of prepare you for that?
Sure. So in 99, my football career ended. I played in NFL Europe. So I played for the Frankfurt Galaxy. And when I went over to Frankfurt, I didn't really go over in NFL Europe thinking of, I'm going to come back to the NFL. Now, don't get me wrong. If a team would have signed me, I would have went back to the NFL. But I kind of went over there as a last hurrah, saying this is pretty much it. And fortunate enough, we won the World Bowl. Jake Delhomme was my quarterback. And so I went out on top. The last game I ever played in professionally or period, I got a nice ring out of it, World Bowl championship, got to score a touchdown in that game. So it was a good way to end my career. And then I always was intrigued with law enforcement. It's just something I always had a passion to do. And so basically I came back in July of 99. I'll never forget it. I was in Boston at a bar, fine establishment. I don't remember which one because I'm sure I was at a bunch that night. And one of my former UMass quarterbacks, Anthony Catterton, is from Orlando. And his stepmom was a detective at the Orlando Police Department. And he said, hey, my stepmom said, if you have a college degree, Orlando's hiring right now. So it's one of those things where I said, you know what the heck? Let me apply to the Orlando Police Department and see what happens. And Murphy's Law, I applied. About 6 weeks later, they hired me. So I said, what the heck? I'm not tied to anything in the Northeast. So I moved to Orlando, wound up meeting my wife, 2 kids later, and almost a 21-year career. I'm grateful I made that move. And so it was just a passion I always had, was law enforcement. And I'm proud of my career. I mean, over half of it, I did a lot of things, but over half of it, the last half, I was a criminal investigator. I was a detective. So I got to do a lot of interesting stuff. And so our world's kind of changing, as you know, the last couple of years. So, being that I work with ESPN as well, I had the opportunity to retire in November. And so since I had that kind of cushion of ESPN, I decided it was the right time to hang it up in law enforcement. So I retired and no regrets. So it was a great career.
And just real quick, sorry, John, as a follow-up, you mentioned being teammates with Jake Delhomme, and just as soon as I heard the name, I think of that Super Bowl with the Patriots. So I just want to know, what was he like as a teammate?
Awesome. And so the funny thing was, it was like Jake's like third year, I think, in NFL Europe. And I remember talking to him in training camp, and he's just like, if it doesn't work out this year, I'm going to go back to Louisiana. I'm just going to coach high school football. I'm going to be a teacher. And so this is it. And then, of course, we win the World Bowl. He gets signed. I don't know if you remember, his career really kicked off. He played for New Orleans. Yep. Mike Ditka was the head coach. And remember, they put him in, and he played really well, and his career kind of took off. And then, of course, he goes to Charlotte and was phenomenal. And you want to laugh, 2 years, because of the COVID year, I'm all screwed up. 2 years ago, I opened my ESPN season, Louisiana. It was Mississippi State at Louisiana in the Superdome. And, of course, Jake was quarterback at Louisiana. And I'm in the broadcast booth, and I go out about 10 minutes before the broadcast to use the restroom. And there's, a bunch of private boxes right next to the TV booth. And all of a sudden, Jake walks out, and we basically run into each other. And I hadn't seen him since probably 99. Yeah. And I was like, Jake, and he was like, Rene. And it was great. So I got to see him. But a great guy. I'm glad lightning struck the way it did for him to have a great career in the NFL, and just a really good guy. Lives back down in Louisiana. Matter of fact, he's doing some radio analyst work for Charlotte. So, great guy. So, and NFL Europe was it was a great time. Just one season over there, but it was a great experience.
Oh, yeah. It opened the door for many guys that ended up having very good, productive careers in the NFL, like Jake Delhomme. Now, obviously, Rene, you're an analyst for ESPN. Talk a little bit about how you got into being a college football analyst and how you ended up at ESPN.
Yeah, so a fascinating story. You guys will like this. So in 2007, I was inducted into the UMass Athletics Hall of Fame. So obviously flew up to Amherst. At that time, 2007, I wasn't a detective yet at Orlando Police Department. I was a tactical officer. So I was in the streets doing tac work. So I get invited up to UMass, obviously, for the Hall of Fame ceremony. And at halftime of the football game, I was the halftime guest. And it was the first time I had ever put headsets on and actually talked in the radio. And I had done TV interviews, but for a good 7-8 minutes, headsets on, talked on the radio. And Bob Beeler was the voice of UMass back then, who's now the voice of Boise State. And so he did the interview, and I got done, and I took the headset off, and I just said to myself, man, I really enjoyed that. I really liked talking about football, and it felt comfortable to me. I said, man, this is something I would really like to do. So I get back to Orlando, and I just kind of start inquiring about broadcasting, and I'm basically reaching out to everybody I know. And I end up getting a contact at ESPN, and it was kind of through UMass, and I get a contact, and they say, yeah, we'd love to help you. Send us your demo tape. So I'm like, I don't have a demo. I don't know. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know if I could audition. I go, no, we need a demo. Just, you can go do high school. You can do Pop Warner. Just go, get some tape, go work. So, kind of that year goes by in 2008, and I'm just kind of still thinking about doing it. Now I become a detective at Orlando Police Department. And though I got the bug, right? I said, I still want to get into broadcasting. So I called back to UMass, and I said, listen, here's the deal. I want to break into broadcasting. I want to be a part of the UMass Sports Network. I'm not looking to get an analyst replaced or anything like that. I just want to join the network. I want to get into broadcasting. So they said, listen, yes, we would love to have you, but we can't afford, UMass Radio Sports Network. We can't afford to fly you up here from Orlando for games. I said, don't worry about it. I talked to my boss, not my Orlando boss, my real boss, my wife. She said, it's okay. So basically I maxed out a credit card. So what I did was, you'll love this. So at the time, I didn't even tell the Orlando Police Department I was doing it. So I was a junior detective. I was working property crimes. I would work Monday through Friday, 8:30 at night, every Friday night. Southwest Airlines had a direct flight from Orlando to Manchester, New Hampshire. It's the cheapest flight I could fly. And I took that flight every Friday night, flew into Manchester. I rented my own car. And then I drove from Manchester to Amherst. You guys have probably made that, right? It's about an hour and a half. Yeah. I would get to Amherst about midnight. One of my real dear friends, good friends, still a good friend of mine, Dan Markowski, who was an associate AD at the time at UMass and former offensive lineman, roommate of mine. I would sleep in his basement. So I'd get to his house about midnight in Hadley, have a few soda pops, talk a little bit, fall asleep about 1 a.m., get up Saturday. I'd go to Dunkin' Donuts, get my Dunkin' Donuts, go to the stadium, and just hang out and then do the game. And then, sleep at his house Saturday night, get up Sunday, fly home, do my detective work. And then on away games, I would fly into whatever city, Richmond, and then I would stay. Dan traveled with the football team as associate AD, and I would stay in his hotel room, so I didn't have to give me an extra hotel room. And so I did that the whole year. So it cost me, I tell people it was a great investment. It cost me about $15,000 of maxing that card out. And then I should say, though, they did pay me. So they paid me, I want to say I got $50 to $100 a game, and it cost me $400 to $500 a game to do it. So I was, but it was an investment. So
right, and which it always is in this business, right?
Correct.
I mean, I've been doing radio over 20 years. I couldn't even tell you the amount of times I've done stuff for free.
Well,
in fact, most of my career I've done it for free.
And John and Kevin, I'll tell you both. And a lot of people told me, "Don't do that. Don't do that. You're nuts." I go, "No, I'm not. I have faith in myself, and I want to do it." And so now, in my wildest dreams, I never thought ESPN would hire me in 1 year. And Josh Maurer, who was the play-by-play, who was there at the time. I mean, even we were amazed. So basically, after that year, I had a demo of radio. I got it back to the people at ESPN, and then I was fortunate and blessed. They gave me basically 3 games. They gave me kind of a subcontract where I got to go on ESPN3. So the internet, it was a great foundation to train young broadcasters, or new broadcasters, I should say, not necessarily young. And so it ended up being great. I got 3 games that year, and I loved it. First game I ever did it was 2010. Yeah, 2010, because I ended up doing UMass Radio 2009. 2010, it was Villanova Temple. It was a great game. It was at the Link, and it was a last-second game, field goal. And I just remember and I had never done TV before, and I was so nervous. And I'll never forget, I had never done an open. We did opens in radio, but it's much different. It's laid back.
Yeah,
it's
different.
Polo shirt. It's like you can spill clam chowder on you. It doesn't matter.
No one knows.
There's no camera. So I'm getting ready to do my first open, and they were having problems with the videotape. And I just remember the producer over my headset saying, "Blanket, we'll do it live." And I just said, "Oh boy, here we go, TV." And because I was like, this is your shot. Like, everyone gets shots in life for the most part. And when that window opens, the door opens, you got to get through it, right? So I was thinking, just do it. And so I'll just never forget getting done with that game, thinking, I love this. This is my passion. I want to do this every single year. And it's one of those things I don't need, and I didn't need to broadcast. I want to broadcast. I mean, it's the cliche. If you do something you love, you're not working a day of your life. And that's how I feel with broadcasting. So after that game, I was hooked. And then I got fortunate enough after that. And it's funny because ESPN, such a big company, and you're always looking for feedback. And what I found out early on in my career is no news is good news. If your bosses aren't calling you, that's good. So I ended up getting a second game. I think I did Florida Atlantic in South Florida, USF down here. And then at the end of the season, they gave me Boston College, Maryland, when Maryland was still in the ACC. And so after the end of that season, they ended up giving me, I think, a 12-game contract the next year. And I just kept moving up the ladder. And so just really fortunate and blessed, working my way up. So and just extremely lucky. It worked out for me, and just couldn't be happier.
Well, as someone who has been covering high school and college for 12 years now and driven hundreds of thousands of miles, that drive to Manchester from Manchester, I have so much respect for that. But you obviously saw a bunch of very talented players this year. The NFL draft is now 2 weeks away. I'm curious if there's any guys that might be flying under the radar in your mind that people aren't talking about, or when they do get drafted, it would be, oh, wow, type of thing.
So one player I saw, I'll give you a couple, but one player I saw a bunch in my career, probably 3 or 4 times, because I did a lot of Tulsa games. A linebacker by the name of Zaven Collins. Okay, now he's going to be a first-round pick, but you just don't hear his names. I mean, the real insiders know he's 6'4", 260. He can play defensive end. He can stand up. He's athletic enough to play linebacker. I mean, he is perfect in the NFL. He's going to be a first-rounder. How high he goes, I don't know, but that's a name you're going to hear on that first day where people are like, who's Zaven Collins? I mean, that's how good this kid is at Tulsa. And like I said, I got to see him play a lot. I got to see him mature as a football player, and a good program at Tulsa. Philip Montgomery turning that program around. They had a nice year this year. But that's a name, although a first rounder, that I think is going to surprise a lot of people. And that's a guy that if he ends up on your team on Sundays, you're going to say, man, he's one heck of a player. No doubt about it. Another one that I saw a bunch right here in my hometown, Orlando, Richie Grant. He's a safety for UCF. For everything I heard, all his tests, everything's been really good. He's a very cerebral player, very smart. What you want from that safety position. Yeah, probably a second or third rounder, I'm thinking. But we'll see. Another one that I saw a couple times, and he's interesting. Guy by the name of Jabril Cox. So he's a linebacker. Started his career, played most of his career at North Dakota State. And we know, how good that program is at the FCS level. Actually transferred last year when the whole COVID thing was happening, went to LSU. So he played at LSU last year. And so that should give you, some idea of how good North Dakota State is as a program, right? So here's Jabril Cox. Now, he was everything there. He made all kinds of plays, All-American, great player. But he goes from North Dakota State University, right, FCS, goes to LSU, right, who had just won a national championship, SEC, and he starts. So goes to show you how good he is and how good that program is. He's another one that's an outside linebacker that can run, that's probably going to be more of a safety type of player, believe it or not, in the NFL. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. And then, of course, I'm interested to see where all the quarterbacks go. Trey Lance, speaking of North Dakota State University, quarterback there, only played one game this spring, came back for North Dakota State just to play one game. Be interesting to see. A lot of people say he's a first rounder, a dynamic athlete. Saw him up close and personal at the national championship last year, I guess maybe 2 years ago, however you want to say it. So another real good. And then again, not a sleeper, but I think he's just going to be an unbelievable NFL player. Is Kyle Pitts, the tight end out of Florida. Just that perfect size of what the NFL does with their tight ends now. Get on the line of scrimmage, bulk up a little bit, be able to run block, but really just a matchup nightmare in that slot position as a big body tight end. So those are just a few that I've actually seen in person over the last couple of years.
Rene, what are your thoughts on the state of college football right now? Obviously, there's a lot going on. You've got the transfer portal. You've got the coaches movement at the start of every offseason. You've got the conversation about whether or not players should be paid or not be paid. In some states, they are going to be compensated if their likeness is being used and whatnot. But what are your overall thoughts right now on the state of college football and what's going on in the game right now?
Yeah, so obviously the money is ridiculous. Whether that's ridiculously good or ridiculously bad, there's a lot of money involved, right? And that's why these coaches, and I don't blame the coaches, right? If another program is going to offer you a lot of money, you're going to go. I mean, there's nothing to it. And so it is what it is. And it's kind of always been that way. I think just the money is so high now. As far as players being a transfer, I don't have a problem with it. It's their right. The issue is the transfer portal. There's too many players in there. There's too many players. It's boggled down, and there's no spots for them. There's nowhere for them to go. So where are they going to go? They're going to go to FCS? Well, there's only so many spots at the FCS. They're going to drop down to Division II. Again, there's only so many spots. So, my issue is more with the player, the breed of player. Listen, you have to take on adversity, not only in life, but in your athletic career. You're going to here's the problem. High school players, and I do high school games for ESPN, right? We put these kids on national television. When I played high school, if your name was in the paper, it was like, holy cow, this is awesome.
That was a big deal.
Yeah.
Now, if these kids aren't on SportsCenter or if they don't have 100,000 Twitter followers, it's crazy, right? Their games are on national television. They get to, and so they're coddled, right? They get to a program, and all of a sudden there's 75 players like them, right? You go to an Alabama, and it's like, holy cow, I'm fourth on the depth chart. How did that happen? Well, and it's just not Alabama. It happens at Ohio State. It happens at Clemson. It happens at Boston College. It happens everywhere. They don't know how to take on adversity, right? They don't know how to fight for their job because everything they've had it. So what do? Well, let's transfer. And then the parents enable them and say, you're right. It's the coaches. And then what happens? The system's boggle down in the transfer portal and you have a problem. So my advice to players is, number one, take your time in the recruiting process. Make sure you get the right school. Just don't pick the school that's the most flashiest, and you better go somewhere where you know in the long run you can get your college degree and you can win a starting job and play. Because at the end of the day, 1% of 1% are going to make their living playing professional football. You're going to fall back on your college degree, and you're going to fall back on the memories of playing college football. If you don't play, there's no memory. So I would tell kids, really take your time in the recruiting process. And when you get to a school and there's some adversity and you're 3 or 4 in a depth chart and your coach is all over you and he's not coddling you, step up a little bit, right? Put effort in and fight to win a starting job or win that backup job. And so, I think that's the biggest issue. As far as players getting paid, the cost of tuition thing, I've always said I think players should get a stipend, right? You get a lot of players that come from low-income families, inner city, whether that's $1,000 a semester, $2,000 a semester, $500, whatever it is, it's going to be more like $1,000, $2,000 a semester, to let them take their girlfriend out on a date, go buy pizza. If they need $500 to fly their mom in, they have it. A couple $1,000s each semester. I don't think that's unreasonable, and I think that's something all colleges can afford. The name and likeness it's going to happen. It's going to happen. There's no doubt about it. And the market will take care of that. Everyone says, oh, it's a bad idea, this, that, and the other. The market will take care of it because if people can make money off their name and likeness because they're a quality player in any sport, it could be at women's soccer, it could be hockey, they're going to do it. And I think that's going to happen. And I don't have a problem with that.
It's interesting when you were talking about the transfer portal. The one name that popped in my head was Tate Martell. There's a kid Vegas kid, highly recruited, goes to Ohio State, doesn't work there. He was one of the first to enter the portal. Then he ends up at Miami. It's not working out there. Makes a position switch, goes from quarterback to receiver. And I think, honestly, Rene, you made so many good points there because I think part of the problem is picking the right school. If you know you're going to go to an Alabama or an LSU and you're going to be the 4th or the 5th guy on a depth chart, don't go there because you know what? If you end up going to Mississippi State, let's say, or Vandy, let's say academically you qualify, you get into a Vandy, go there because if you can play, you might not necessarily be playing for a national championship, but you're going to get a heck of a degree and you're going to get to play and you're still going to put yourself in a position where you could play on Sundays if you're good enough. And I think, unfortunately, there's so many kids. Like I think another kid I think about is Justin Fields. He was going to go to Penn State, had a relationship with Joe Moorhead. It didn't work out there. Next thing you know, he stays home, goes to Georgia. Well, Jake Fromm was there. Who was advising this kid?
Yeah.
Why wasn't there someone in that process saying, you know what, Justin, you might want to think about going somewhere else. He's their guy the next 2 years. You're not going to be the guy here. Of course, he transfers to Ohio State, and the rest is history. But more often than not, part of it, I think, is who is advising these young men in terms of their decision-making. Because if it's just parents, the parents are going to push them to go in a direction they also want them to go in. But if it's someone like their coach or a guidance counselor, someone outside of the family, if they can listen to those people, maybe they'd make a better decision and maybe they wouldn't have to enter the portal. But I do kind of want to ask you a sidebar question. How can the NCAA regulate the portal without restricting the players? It's kind of a slippery slope, right?
Yeah, it is. And so, I don't have an answer for that. I don't know. I just know by letting them in the portal, there's just I don't know what the last number is. I remember I looked, but it's astronomical. I don't know if you guys know, but there's way too many players in there, and there's not nearly as many spots for those players. So a lot of those players are not going to have a place to play. And now, let's not forget, let's throw COVID on top of it, right? Where you can increase rosters if you have the money as a program. I think the NCAA is going to allow you to go over 85 if you have the money to fund those scholarships. So it's kind of going to be kind of like the wild, wild west. It's a little crazy with what's going on right now.
What did you think of what was going on at the end of last season when players started to opt out? I mean, we've seen this in the last 5 years. It's kind of become a trend now where guys will skip bowl games because they want to get ready for the draft. But what are your thoughts on players just opting out at the end of the season? I personally think it's very concerning to me, and I think it needs to be better regulated. by the NCAA, because if they don't, and players can just start leaving programs in November once the program's out of bowl contention or whatever the case might be, it's going to turn into the wild, wild west. And that's the last thing you want if you're the NCAA.
Well, and it goes back, John, to what you just talked about. Who is advising and who is guiding these players, right? So they get this guidance or lack thereof from high school into college, and then they're getting guidance at the end. And so, I mean, I get it, like what Christian McCaffrey, I get it. You're going to be a first-round pick, but I don't like it either. I'm an old school person. I just think, man, when you opt out like that, you are letting down your teammates. I mean, you've worked together, and just see it through. I don't care if it's the, Poland Weed Eater Bowl or the national championship. Finish it out with your teammates. And so that really bothers me. I'm with you there. I get it. This year bothered me because you got players, 7-8 games in saying, well, I'm opting out because of COVID. Really? Right. If you're going to opt out because of COVID, why didn't you do it 2 months ago? You're saying you're opting out because of COVID now because you're not getting along with your coach and you're 2-6. It's like, come on, man. So that's kind of fits in with the narrative that we just talked about. When adversity hits, it's not you, it's someone else. And I'm just going to leave and I'm going to go in the NFL. And so I'm with you. I don't like it. I don't know what ultimately the NCAA can do because if a player doesn't want to play, you
can't make them.
I just don't like it. But I mean, we look at now, I think it's a culture issue with program, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. I don't think anyone opted out from Alabama. Now, granted, yes, they in a national championship, but none of their first rounders opted out. I don't think, Clemson, Ohio State. I mean, I could be wrong, but it just seems like there's certain programs where they stay. And so, I don't like it either. I just think it's kind of like quitting on your teammate, man. I mean, I get it. I get it. First round pick, second round pick, you're going to make a lot of money. But, the bottom line is you got enough chance getting hurt in game 1 as you do game 12. So let's see it through. Let's see it through with your teammates.
And just real quick,
John, I'm sorry to cut you off, Kevin. John Chat checks in. Sounds great. Good show. That has nothing to do with us. That's all Rene. He's making us look good.
And look at his avatar there. He's got a Bruins jersey there. Obviously a Bruins fan. So he's probably happy UMass won the national championship in hockey. I don't know. So. Maybe he's a Northeastern fan. I don't know.
You're killing me. No, but just to add on to your last point, you look at BC, for example, all year long, they talked about sacrifice and, didn't have a single positive test. Yeah. So either you're going to make that sacrifice for your teammates or you're not. It's an either or. It's really not a difficult decision, I don't think. But then again, you do have kids growing up in the AAU, culture where, like you said, if everything's not perfect, I'm done.
And so in Boston College, it was a great story last year, really had a great year, and they opted, correct me if I'm wrong, my memory serves me right, they opted out of their bowl game. They didn't go to a bowl game. Yep. But I love what they said. They left it to a team vote, and they decided not to. But now you got to remember, you just talked about it, Kevin. That's a team at that program because Massachusetts, obviously, up there, your guys, the rules with COVID, every state is a little different, a little more stringent, less stringent. They really bubbled themselves as a football program. So those are kids that didn't even see their family. So I get why they didn't want to go to a bowl game. That's a true sacrifice, had a good year, and they just wanted to move on. So, I get that. But, a true sacrifice, good football program. That's another one. I can't wait to see how they rebound. Or I shouldn't say rebound because they had a good year. How they play in 2021 should be fascinating.
All right, final question here, my friend. 2-part question here. A, what do you enjoy the most about being a college football analyst? And B, what did you miss the most last season during the pandemic calling the games that you did call?
Well, I'll go with B first because it's the easiest. The fans, the pageantry. Now, most of the games I did a bunch of Sunbelt games last year. So every fan base was about 20%. So we had some down in Texas State, like I said, Georgia Southern, Coastal. So there was some fans, but there's nothing like a sold out crowd in a college stadium. Nothing like it with the band playing and just so that's the thing I miss. And I will tell you this: I did Stanford, Oregon State last year, and it was a Pac-12 after dark game, and Oregon State had 0 fans. You want to talk about eeriness? Doing a game in a Pac-12 stadium with not one fan. So It's definitely the fans, no doubt about it. So I can't wait to have them back. I'm an optimist. I think we're going to be close to 100%.
You've been an optimist, by the way, throughout this whole thing on Twitter, and I appreciate that, Rene, because you've always looked at the silver lining. You weren't being negative. You were like, hey, you know what? If the sooner we get back to normal, the sooner we get back to our lives, the better. You weren't politicizing it. You weren't making it about left or right. You were just simply being positive.
Because that's what we need more of. And that's what too many people do, John. That really bothers me. I'm a realist, right? The majority of Americans still had to go to work every day. Still have to put their kids to school. Still, I mean, we do the best we can. If it means wear a mask, we wear a mask. If it means social distance, social distance. If it means get vaccinated, get vaccinated. I got my wife's vaccinated. I got my shot. And so you do your part, but you also just don't stop living and shut down, which a lot of people want to do. So I'm just kind of like a realist about it. So I appreciate the kind words there. So, but yeah, I'm an optimist. I think we'll be close to 100% football season. So let's hope, fingers crossed, because that's what I miss the most, that pageantry and the fans. And the thing I love most about calling college football is kind of the same thing. It's traveling to these college towns or cities, but I lean more towards I love the college towns. And just seeing something new. Like I had never done a Florida Gators game, and just a couple of years ago I got to do one. So going to Gainesville and just, seeing literally, I kid you not, literally 1,000 RVs lined up, getting ready to go in the stadium. It's just, the passion that alumnus has. People are NFL fans, but college is just a different level. And I try to tell people this all the time. It doesn't matter if you're a football fan or not. I mean, there's a lot of people that went to UMass or maybe not UMass is a great example, but any school, a Penn State, a Boston College, they're not football fans, but they have pride because they're from that school. And so they're always going to support them on Saturday, and they're going to go to the games and they're going to watch them on TV. And so that pageantry that comes out, I love the most. And I just think college football is electric. I really do. And just each year, new names pop up and get to see, like we talked about, being on a national stage. And this fits into what you said, John, about kids going to the wrong program just because it's a big name program. Grayson McCall, the quarterback at Coastal Carolina, that kid is phenomenal. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I saw him a bunch in person. He's going to be great next year. He's at Coastal Carolina. Household name. Everyone knows where he is. Didn't go to an Ohio State, didn't go to an Alabama, didn't go to South Carolina. He went to Coastal Carolina. So you can make a name at the quote-unquote mid-major. You just got to pick the right school. So, yeah, I just can't wait until 2021. Now, I will tell you guys, I got a game in 2 weeks, which is really odd. I'm doing an FCS first-round playoff game. Obviously, I don't know who I'm doing yet because it's the playoffs. Right. So I'll find out next week. It's weird. I really haven't watched much football because they really haven't been on TV. You just kind of got to try to find them on the internet. So needless to say, I will be doing a lot of prep work probably Sunday night when I find out who my matchup is and where I'm going. So we'll knock the dust off. We'll get one in spring here and then get ready for the fall of 2021.
Yeah, and hopefully, like you said earlier, you have a full schedule and it's in front of full stadiums and you could feel like you're back to normal again. Well, Rene, I've been a longtime fan of your work. Obviously, much respect for you and your great playing career. I've watched many of the games you've called, my friend, and you are awesome. You've always been one of my favorite analysts. So we really appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. It means a lot to us. And let's do this again soon if we can.
Yeah, absolutely. This is awesome.
You got it, Kevin. Thank you, John. Thank you. My pleasure. Anytime. Give me a shout back, especially during football season.
Sounds good, my friend. Thank you, Rene.
Right, thank you.
Take care. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, that'll do it for this week's episode of the New England Football Show. Join us again next week. For Kevin Stone, I'm John Serenitas. Until then, peace.
See ya.